You are listening to Action Design Radio, podcast of the Action Design Network, a globally recognized nonprofit organization dedicated to promoting all aspects of behavioral science. We bring you leading researchers and practitioners to discuss the latest behavioral science insights and how they can practically be applied to make a better world for all. Thanks for tuning in and enjoy today's episode.
Hi, this is Iraq. Over the past few years, Eric and I have used this podcast to highlight stories and guidance that we thought would be helpful to behavioral scientists. We've interviewed academics, designers, educators, and many others across a variety of topics. And we've been pleasantly surprised by the positive response from all of you. But we want to try something new. There are lots of stories and lessons that we don't see because of what we're exposed to. And for many topics, it's quite likely that we're not necessarily the best people to tell the story. So we would like to offer up this platform to others, folks with a unique perspective or topic that they're knowledgeable and passionate about, and a point of view that may not already be well represented in behavioral science media. Today's episode on the psychology of black hair comes from Shanta Ricks. Shanta received her Master of Arts in Psychology from North Carolina Central University. During her time in grad school, she focused her thesis on researching the history of black hair and how it influences the self-concept of black women. She continues to expand her knowledge on this topic while also informing society of the importance of black hair. Shanta is a behavioral scientist at the Center for Advanced Hindsight at Duke University. At the lab, her research includes exploring what factors play a role in racial health and financial inequity. Let's listen in.
Imagine you're an audiovisual expert and have been employed at your job for many years, and you were furloughed due to the pandemic. So you decided to move to the West Coast after hearing that the company is going to have more hiring positions in that area. You've been recommended for this position by your East Coast colleagues, so you're feeling pretty good. You have the interview and things go well. However, you're told by the hiring manager that your hair is a deal breaker. You have to cut your hair in order to secure the job. This happened to an African American male by the name of Jeffrey Thornton last year. Here's another scenario. Imagine you just had an interview for a customer service representative position. All goes well, and you are hired for the position. You then meet with the HR manager to discuss scheduling and other logistics. As you are leaving, all of a sudden, the HR manager pulled you aside and said that your hair does not comply with the company's dress code policy and you will have to cut it. You refuse to do that, and now your job offer is withdrawn. This happened to an African American woman by the name of Chastity Jones in 2010. So what's happening here? These individuals were denied employment opportunities with the common denominator being their hair. Black hair is different. Black hair, also known as Afro-textured hair, grows differently compared to their white counterparts. Black people's natural hair tends to be kinkier, coilier, and curlier as a result of their flat oval-shaped hair follicles compared to white people. But why is that a problem? First, let's look at history. Hairstyles such as afros, braids, locks, twists, and cornrows, just to name a few, are commonly worn amongst those with Afro-textured hair. We call those Afrocentric hairstyles. These hairstyles are a part of the Black culture and have been for many centuries. For example, dating back to the 15th century, Black hair reflected social aspects, being that it was a marker for determining one's age, what clan one belonged to, occupation type, status, ethnic identity, wealth, and even mood for African tribes. For example, in the Wolof culture of Senegal, young girls who weren't of marrying age partially shaved their heads to emphasize their unavailability for courting. African hairstyles contain major aesthetic aspects as well. In some tribes, clay, it will be applied to the hair so that it could be matted together in designs to give the illusion of it being carved out of stone. Obtaining these aesthetics occurred through the use of hand-carved combs, which are either carved from ivory or various woods with a handle shape to fit the hand with smooth and round teeth attached, which made it easier to detangle kinky, curly hair without snagging it. In a nutshell, the texture of African hair, which is this tightly spiraled hair, enabled Africans to shape and design their hair in various ways to communicate. When enslaved, Europeans recognized the importance of hair to Africans and so to erase the slaves' culture, and also wanted to alter the relationship they had with their hair by either shaving the slave's hair or making it hard for the enslaved to even care for their hair. Slaves no longer wore their hair as a part of their cultural practices, but they wore their hair tailored to their work assignment. Slaves of the elite wore wigs, and they styled their hair in means of resembling the fashion of the dominant culture. Slaves who worked inside of the plantation wore neat and unkempt hairstyles, such as tight braids, plaits, and cornrows. Slaves who were forced to work in the fields for long periods of time wore different hairstyles. Women wore scarves, whereas the men shaved their heads and wore hats. Further distancing blacks from their cultural roots, European Americans used derogatory words to devalue black hair. This made Eurocentric hair, which is again this straight silky hair, to be deemed as beautiful, and everything else did not. Meaning that African features, such as kinky hair, were seen as inferior and unattractive by Europeans, whereas fair skin and straight hair was favored. Black slaves who were of lighter skin and had straight hair or looser curls had better privileges. They engaged in less backbreaking labor, had better food, education, and clothing. Considering how straight and fair skin was viewed as favorable in the eyes of the Europeans, this ideology was internalized by the black community. A hair texture hierarchy was developed. So we have the good versus bad hair. The distinction between good versus bad hair was based on texture, length, and curl pattern. So a person with good hair is considered to have longer, straighter, and silkier hair, whereas a person with bad hair has short, curly, and woolly hair. Therefore, lighter skin as well as longer, straighter, and silkier hair was deemed as good because it closely aligned with European features. If one did not possess good hair, nor weren't of lighter skin, they were considered to have bad features. Though not as overt as today, the case in which black hair is deemed as unfavorable is still embedded in our culture today. Let's start with American beauty standards. The ideal image of female beauty in American culture is based upon having Eurocentric features. To have beautiful hair within American society means to have hair that is straight, that is silky, and that is long. Those who do not possess Eurocentric features are deemed to have bad features. For black women, Their physical features are the opposite of white standards, meaning that their hair, for example, is coilier, is kinkier, and is curlier, which means that the physical features of African American hair tends to be viewed as undesirable and unattractive. Black hair is not only viewed as inferior when it comes to beauty standards, but professionalism as well. Going back to slavery, Black slaves emulated whiteness or having straight hair and hoping to reap the benefits of being white, such as having freedom, being an upper class, educated, and employed. Straighter hair was not only the ideal beauty standard, but it was viewed as a means of survival. So many Black slaves began to straighten their hair to reap these benefits and became very creative and resourceful in doing so. In a way, this same notion exists today. There's tons of research which shows that Afrocentric hairstyles are viewed as less professional compared to Eurocentric hairstyles. For example, Adegbembo in 2019 examined explicit bias of Black women's hair among Black and white women. In the study, participants were shown headshot pictures of women, both Black and white, with a variety of hairstyles. The headshots of the women were divided into 4 conditions, each with 3 different hairstyles per condition. The conditions included the Black target with socially conforming hairstyles, like having straight hair. Next was the Black target with Afrocentric hairstyles, such as having locks and twists. Then we have the third condition, the white target with socially conforming hairstyles. And lastly, the white target with non-socially conforming hairstyles. The researcher found that the Black target with Afrocentric hairstyles were generally rated less professional than the Black target woman with socially conforming hairstyles. It's even more unfortunate because much of what is deemed as unprofessional versus professional influences the way in which Black women wear their hair. For example, in 2016, the Perception Institute conducted a good hair study that examined the way in which attitudes towards Black women's hair differed between Black and white women. They did so by creating the first hair implicit association test to measure implicit bias against textured hair. They also included an online survey to gauge explicit attitudes about how natural textured hair is perceived. So they found that white women, they showed a preference for smooth hairstyles, suggesting that they are considered more acceptable than textured hairstyles in professional settings. Similarly, in 2019, Dawson et al. Examined natural Black hair bias in the workplace. So the researchers, they analyzed over 200 comments posted to online discussion boards and found that some Black women are embracing their natural hairstyles. So that's a good thing. But the bad thing is that many felt pressured to conform to Eurocentric hairstyles, and some even experienced negative consequences stemming from their natural hairstyle choices, such as not being hired for a job. These biases are very problematic in the sense that the way in which one chooses to wear their hair may not only impact the way in which they feel about themselves, but it denies them of their ability of self-expression and racial pride. It also negatively impacts their ability to secure employment or education because their hair is being deemed as unprofessional. But even with these negative forces in society, Black hair is important as ever. Black hair, it not only historically served as a way to communicate, but it also ties into Black women's self-esteem and their identity. So, for example, in my thesis, I had the honor to survey over 200 Black college women. And the goal was to understand if their natural hair influences their self-esteem. I found a positive, significant correlation. So the more an individual held favorable views towards their natural hair, there tends to be an increase in their overall self-esteem levels. My findings are also backed up by tons of research. So one study is by Johnson and Bankhead in 2016, as well as Dr. Danya Oriowo in 2016. Similarly, another study, which is conducted by Pierre in 2016, showed that for Black women, how satisfied they are with their hair, generally speaking, so regardless if it's natural or not, does influence the way in which she feels about herself and the way in which others may perceive her. So just to keep going, the importance in which Black women place on their hair is evident. So according to EWG.org, Black people make up approximately 13% of the U.S. population, but account for almost 22% of the $42 billion a year in beauty products. This data suggests that the expenses African American women spend on their hair are reflective of the importance of their hair. Not only is money a proxy of importance for their hair, but also time and effort. So the Good Hair study that I talked about earlier, which was conducted by their Perception Institute, so they also found that Black women were more likely to report spending more time on their hair than white women. And they also were more likely to report having professional styling appointments more often compared to white women. So as we can see for many Black women, their hair is important. But I do want to recognize that for some, it may not be that deep. It could be that for one, how somebody chooses to wear their hair could be a matter of convenience. For two, it could be a way for them to express their individuality. Or it could just be a way to express their personality. But regardless, Black hair is rooted in cultural, social, and historical significance. Unfortunately, society does not see that significance. Okay, so let's circle back to those scenarios from the beginning. Jeffrey Thornton and Chastity Jones are a few of many, many cases in which Black people were unfortunately denied employment opportunities all because of their hair. The way in which Black hairstyles are viewed negatively are rooted in biases and racism that are evident in the dress code policies that even makes it okay for these denied opportunities to occur. So dress code policies are developed by state and local laws. These laws can create restrictive dress code policies if employees have a rational basis for the requirements and if it doesn't violate the Title VI Act. So this act prevents discrimination based on 6 protected classes, with one of those classes being race. So the problem lies in how race discrimination is defined. So according to this act, race discrimination occurs when an employer discriminates against immutable characteristics associated with race, such as skin color, hair texture, or certain facial features. So immutable is defined as unchanging over time or unable to be changed. In regards to hair, some courts have ruled that certain hairstyles are not immutable characteristics of race and are not protected under the Title VI Act, even if the hairstyle is typically associated with race. Cases such as Rogers versus American Airlines in 1981, Eatman versus United Parcel Service in 2002, Pitts versus Wild Adventures in 2008, and the EEOC versus Catastrophe Management Solutions in 2013, tells that story. Not only is the wording with the Title VI Act problematic, but the term neutral hairstyle within a dress code policy as well. So in certain dress code policies, a company could say that only neutral hairstyles are permitted. But what constitutes neutral in terms of hair is entirely subjective. Therefore, state and local laws can develop policies to ban hairstyles even if these hairstyles are associated with certain races. Unfortunately, this could lead to hair discrimination for hairstyles worn commonly amongst Black people. The rejection of Black textured hairstyles is seen in grooming policies banning braids, locks, and unusual hairstyles, or in policies that may seem generic by banning unkept, unclean, or extreme hairstyles. We need to advocate for change. Everyone should have the ability to express themselves and have the same opportunity for employment and education, regardless of the hairstyles that are deemed as unprofessional and unattractive, which are rooted in racism. A group of organizations, including Dove, National Urban League, Color of Change, and Western Center of Law and Poverty, teamed up to create the Crown Act. So CROWN stands for Create a Respectful and Open World for Natural Hair. The CROWN Act prohibits discrimination on hairstyle and hair texture, which is the denial of an employment and educational opportunities because of hair texture or protective hairstyles, including braids, locks, twists, or bantu knots. So as of today, the U.S. House passed this act and now it's heading to the Senate. So far, it has been enacted in 14 states. These states include California, New York, New Jersey, Virginia, Colorado, Washington, Maryland, Connecticut, New Mexico, Delaware, Nebraska, Oregon, and Kansas City within Missouri, as well as Covington within Kentucky. The goal is to enact this act in all states. With your help, this goal can be achieved. On their website, thecrownact.com, you can join the movement to shatter race-based hair discrimination by signing a petition to urge legislators to vote yes on the Crown Act. If you found this topic interesting and important, or if you want to get more involved, be sure to check out their website at thecrownact.com. Thank you all so much.
Thanks for tuning in. If you have a unique topic that you're knowledgeable and passionate about, and a point of view that may not already be well represented in behavioral science media, we would love to hear from you. Send us a little note at zarakstar.com/collaborate. That's ZARAKSTAR.com/collaborate. We review these about once a month to look for the next episode in this sort of series. And what you get from us is logistical support in producing your podcast. This might mean working with Eric or myself on the content or the framing, or working with our producer. We can also join you on the podcast if you'd like, but that is not required. And we'll also publish and promote your podcast on Action Design via our different channels. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.